Have you ever imagined a world completely different from the one we know today? A world where people lived for entire centuries, where nature seemed to be in perfect balance, and where the relationship between the divine and the human was almost palpable. But something happened. Something that changed the course of humanity forever. Before everything was devastated by a great catastrophe, Earth was a fascinating and, at the same time, mysterious place. But what was this world really like before the flood? Was it similar to what we know today, or are we talking about a completely different reality? What were the climate, technology, culture, and even the spirituality of those civilizations that inhabited the planet before the fury of the waters? What you discover in this video may change your view of humanity's past. Stay with me until the end, because there are surprising revelations waiting for you. In fact, before continuing, take the opportunity to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell so you don't miss any content like this. And of course, share this video with your friends. In this way, more people will be able to learn about this fascinating story. Now let's delve into this enigma from the past. One of the first things we must understand about the world before the flood is that it was drastically different from ours in many ways. And one of the most impressive was human longevity. Did you know that back then people lived for hundreds of years? That's how it is. According to the Bible, the patriarchs who lived before the flood reached ages that would be considered impossible today. Adam, for example, lived 930 years. His son Seth reached 912. Methuselah, the oldest man on record, lived an incredible 969 years. And Noah, the man who witnessed the flood and survived its destruction, lived no less than 950 years. But what made people of that time live so long? What was different in the world before the flood? There are some theories to explain this phenomenon, and one of the most accepted suggests that the Earth had a much more favorable environment for life. According to this hypothesis, there was a layer of water vapor that surrounded the planet, protecting it from direct solar radiation and creating a stable, humid and temperate climate. This natural shield not only made the world a more habitable place, but it may also have been one of the factors that allowed humans to live a very long time. However, this same vapor layer would have collapsed during the flood, causing unprecedented torrential rains and completely changing the balance of the Earth. The climate became more severe. Solar radiation began to directly affect human health, and consequently, life expectancy fell drastically in subsequent generations. But that was not the only thing that distinguished that era. The pre-flood world also had a more direct connection between the divine and the human. The Bible reveals to us that God spoke directly to some people. Adam, Eve, Cain, Enoch, Noah, all had direct contact with the Creator. God instructed them, warned them, made promises to them, and even warned them about their actions. But he also judged and punished them when they strayed from the path. Furthermore, one of the most intriguing mysteries of this era was the existence of peculiar beings, described as giants called Nephilim. But who were they? How did they arise? What really happened between the sons of God and the daughters of men? This is a topic that generates heated debates to this day, and what you're about to discover could completely change your perception of this forgotten period of humanity. There was something disturbing about those days, something that corrupted the essence of creation. It was not just the common sin of man, but a transgression that went beyond the limits of flesh and spirit. The earth was filled with a hybrid race, born from a forbidden union between celestial beings and humans. The Nephilim, giants of enormous strength and wicked hearts, wreaked chaos and violence throughout the world, leading humanity to irreversible decline. But who really were these fallen angels who chose to abandon their heavenly position to mingle with mortals? What led them to this rebellion? To understand this mystery, we need to go back even further in time, even before the foundation of the world. Long before the existence of the earth and the creation of man, God already ruled in glory with his Son. And around him were magnificent spiritual beings, the angels, created to worship him and do his will. Among these angels, there was one who stood out more than all the others. His name was Lucifer, which means morning star. He wasn't just any angel. He was an anointed cherub, a being of light, endowed with incomparable wisdom, beauty, and power. Its function was to cover the throne of God with its wings, performing heavenly worship. But something was growing inside him, something dark and burning, the pride, the envy, the ambition to be more than a servant, to be worshipped instead of worshipping. He not only wanted to be in the presence of God, but he wanted to take his place. His mind was consumed by the desire to rise above the Creator, to reign over all celestial beings, and that desire was his undoing. The rebellion began in the heart of Lucifer, but soon spread among the angels. A third of them were seduced by his promise of greatness and turned against God himself. However, no plan against the Almighty can succeed. The war in heaven was swift and decisive. The Creator, in his justice, expelled Lucifer and his followers, expelling them from the heavenly realms. Lucifer fell, and with his fall, he changed his name. He stopped being the morning star and began to be called Satan, the adversary. His fallen allies, who were once glorious angels, turned into demons, evil spirits that began to act under his command. But defeat was not the end of the war. On the contrary, it was the beginning of a new battlefield. Now, Satan turned his attention to earth, the place where God had placed his most beautiful creation, man and woman, made in his image and likeness. For Satan, this was the perfect opportunity to attack. He saw in humanity an opportunity for revenge, a way to corrupt and destroy the work of the Creator. If he could not reign in the heavens, he would make the earth his domain. And so, temptation entered the Garden of Eden. The ancient serpent, cunning and deceitful, approached the woman. His words were seductive, filled with a venom that subtly distorted the truth. If you eat this fruit, you will be like God, knowing good and evil. The promise was tempting. The desire to be more than she was, to possess unlimited knowledge, consumed Eva's heart. She took the fruit and ate it. And then he handed it to the man who, without hesitation, also tried it. It was at this moment that humanity fell. The direct connection to God was severed, innocence was lost, and the earth would never be the same. But the worst of all, with this act of disobedience, Adam and Eve handed over the authority they had over the world into the hands of Satan. The enemy now became the prince of this age, and with his influence, sin spread like a plague, bringing with it death, suffering, and destruction. Since then, the history of humanity has been marked by a continuous battle between good and evil, between the fall and the redemption, between judgment and grace, and one of the first records of this struggle can be seen in the story of two brothers, children of the first couple created by God. Two men who represent the opposite paths that humanity could take. One chose obedience, the other rebellion. And this is how the first bloodshed on earth occurred. Cain and Abel, children of Adam and Eve, represented two different paths before God. Abel, a shepherd, offered the Lord the best of his sheep, demonstrating devotion and humility. Cain, a peasant, brought fruits from the earth, but without the same dedication of heart. God's eyes were pleased with Abel's sacrifice, but he rejected Cain's offering, and this was enough for jealousy and anger to consume the heart of the firstborn. Overcome with resentment, Cain planned the death of his own brother. The murder took place in the countryside, far from human witnesses, but nothing escapes the eyes of the Creator. The Lord called Cain and asked him, "Where is Abel your brother?" In his arrogance, he contemptuously replied, "I don't know. Am I my brother's keeper?" But divine justice cannot be deceived. God declared, "Your brother's blood cries out to me from the earth." The curse on Cain was inevitable. The land, which once gave him sustenance, would now become infertile for him. His destiny would be to wander aimlessly, carrying the weight of his guilt. In desperation, Cain cried out, "My punishment is too great to bear. I will be a fugitive, and anyone who finds me will kill me." But in an act of mercy, God put a mark on him, ensuring that no one would kill him. Thus, Cain left, went into exile, and settled in the land of Nod, east of Eden. But his story did not end there. Even bearing the mark of misfortune, he raised descendants and built the first city mentioned in the Bible, naming it after his son, Enoch. This moment marks the beginning of human civilization, where Cain's descendants began to develop skills that would shape the world. His descendants became masters in different areas. Jabal was the first to live in tents and domesticate livestock, being the ancestor of the shepherds. Jubal became a talented musician and created string and wind instruments. Tubal-Cain mastered metallurgy, manufacturing copper and iron tools, an impressive advance for the time. Naamah, the only woman mentioned in this lineage, had an unknown role, but her mention indicates that she had relevance within that emerging society. However, Cain's lineage not only advanced in skill, but also in corruption. The distancing from God became evident, and sin multiplied. Among his descendants was a man named Lamech, who surpassed the limits of his generation. He was the first to take more than one wife, introducing polygamy, and he also became a murderer. His violence was so brutal that he boasted to his wives, saying, "I killed a man for wounding me and a young man for beating me. If Cain was avenged 7 times, Lamech will be avenged 70 times. Meanwhile, far from Cain's cursed offspring, Adam and Eve had another son, Seth. With the birth of Set, a new lineage emerged, marked not only by blood but by the search for the presence of God. Among his descendants would emerge a man who would walk with God in a unique way, someone who would not taste death like the others. But what was so special about this new strain? What differentiated these descendants of Seth from the children of Cain? Among them, a man would emerge whose connection with God was so deep that he simply disappeared from earth. Who was he? And what is the mystery behind his destiny? What you're about to discover challenges everything we know about death and eternity. While most simply lived their lives, leaving only descendants and birth records, Enoch was different. He was not only remembered for his genealogy, but also for his deep communion with the Creator. His life was not limited to what he owned or what he built, but to the fact that he chose to walk in obedience to God when evil had already begun to dominate the hearts of men. The Bible reveals to us that Enoch was a prophet, someone who dared to speak out against the corruption of his time. He did not remain silent in the face of the evil that surrounded him. In a time when violence and injustice were growing unchecked, Enoch remained faithful and announced God's judgment on the wicked. And it was because of his unwavering faith that God did something that had never been seen before. He took Enoch to himself without him tasting death. It just disappeared. The first man in history taken away by God himself. But Enoch was the exception. The rest of humanity sank deeper and deeper into degradation. The world before the flood was not only corrupt, was on the verge of destruction. Families became battlefields, ties were broken by selfishness and betrayal. The powerful oppressed the weak, and violence became the universal language. The earth, which had been created to reflect the glory of God, was now permeated with blood and sin. The hearts of men were no longer inclined to good, but were immersed in evil thoughts, day and night. Then God looked at his creation and felt deep sadness. Humanity, made in his image, had chosen the path of corruption. The earth, once a garden of life, was contaminated by evil. It was then that God made a radical decision: destroy everything and start over. Not only men, but also animals, birds, the entire creation that was under the influence of sin. The original purity of the world had been tarnished to such an extent that only a new beginning could restore it. But amidst all this impending destruction, one man found God's favor, a man whose life stood in stark contrast to the evil of his generation. His name was Noah. Noah was not perfect, but he was fair. In the midst of a society given over to chaos, he still sought God. He did not follow the path of the crowd. He did not allow himself to be corrupted by the customs of his time. His loyalty earned him an extraordinary mission to be guardian of the new humanity. God chose Noah to build an ark, a refuge against the judgment that was to come. But this would not be any task. The project was not the work of a single man, but a plan devised by the Creator himself. The ark would have specific dimensions, a resistance to withstand the greatest catastrophe that has ever hit the earth. It would be the refuge of life in the midst of destruction. The colossal structure would be 300 cubits long, 50 wide, and 30 high. Converting to our current measurement, this would be equivalent to approximately 135 meters long, 22.5 meters wide, and 13.5 meters high. A true masterpiece of engineering, designed to withstand the impact of a world that would be submerged in water. But what Noah didn't know at the time was that his obedience would not only save his family, but would forever change the history of humanity. While Noah worked tirelessly building the ark, following every detail of divine instructions, the world around him remained immersed in disbelief. For more than a century, he warned people of impending judgment and told them to repent. But instead of listening to his words, they laughed at him, mocked his faith, and considered him a lunatic. After all, it had never rained on earth, and the idea of a flood seemed absurd to those who trusted only what they could see. Time passed, and people continued with their lives as if nothing was going to happen. Parties, weddings, commerce, humanity continued on its way as if it were invincible. But the day has come. The moment that Noah announced so much finally came true. God spoke to him again and said, "Enter you and all your household into the ark, for I have seen you right before me in this generation." Noah obeyed. He took with him his wife, his sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and his daughters-in-law. Furthermore, as God had commanded, he gathered the animals, 7 pairs of those considered pure, and a pair of those considered impure, as well as 7 pairs of birds of the air to preserve their species. And so, for 7 days, they prepared for the inevitable. And on the appointed day, what had never happened before became a reality. The heavens opened, and a storm never seen before descended upon the earth. But it wasn't just rain. The depths of the abyss ruptured, waters gushing forth from within the earth itself, flooding everything with an uncontrollable force. The storm did not stop. For 40 days and 40 nights it rained without interruption, and the waters rose frighteningly. Rivers overflowed, lakes became one with the seas, and once imposing mountains were submerged. The ark, which until then rested on dry land, began to float, carried by the waves that now dominated the world. No city, no fortress, no refuge could resist. Men and animals desperately tried to escape, climbing trees, running towards the highest mountains, but all in vain. What Noah warned so much about was happening before his eyes. God's judgment had arrived. Death devastated everything. The breath of life was erased from the earth, from the large wild animals to the small insects, from the birds that flew above the skies to the last man who dared to defy the voice of the Creator. Nothing remained but the furious waters that covered the planet. Silence took over the world. The only life left was the one inside the ark. Noah and his family were now isolated, adrift in an endless ocean, not knowing how long they would remain there. They had escaped trial, but what came next? What would the future look like after such a drastic reboot? Days passed, and the ark continued floating on the water. For 150 days, the world remained submerged, with no sign of land. Noah didn't know what would come next, but God never forgets those who are faithful to him. And then something changed. The wind blew over the earth, and the waters began to recede. The fountains of the great deep were closed, and the torrents that came down from heaven ceased. Little by little, devastation gave way to hope. The ark, which for months had been the only refuge of life, finally found rest in the mountains of Ararat, but the ground was still covered in mud and debris from the destruction. Noah waited patiently. Time passed, and in the 10th month, the first peaks of the mountains began to rise above the waters. The earth was revealing itself again, but it was still too early to leave the shelter. For 40 days Noah watched, waiting for a sign. Then he opened the window of the ark and released a raven. The bird left and did not return, flying from one side to the other without landing. This was a sign that the land was not ready yet. Sometime later, Noah sent a dove. Unlike the crow, she needed a dry place to land, but finding no solid land, he returned to the ark. 7 more days passed and Noah tried again. This time, the dove returned at dusk with an olive branch in its beak. That green twig was proof that life was beginning to be reborn. The trial had passed. Hope appeared on the horizon. Another week passed, and Noah released the dove once again. This time she didn't come back. The message was clear. The world was ready to be inhabited again. On the first day of the first month of the 601st year of Noah's life, he removed the cover of the ark and saw that the earth was dry. But he didn't leave immediately. He waited for God's order, and then came the instruction, "Go out of the ark, you, your wife, your sons, and your sons' wives. Bring with you all the animals, so that they may spread throughout the earth, be fruitful, and multiply." And so, after more than a year cloistered, Noah and his family returned to dry land. The animals left in pairs, each following their instinct, ready to repopulate creation. The world, formerly covered by the waters of judgment, was now reborn, cleansed, and restored. Noah's first act upon setting foot on dry land was not to build a house or seek shelter. His priority was another. He erected an altar and offered a sacrifice to the Lord, expressing his gratitude for salvation. The aroma of the burnt offering ascended to heaven, and God was pleased with Noah's heart. Then the Lord made a promise. He declared that he would never again destroy the earth through a flood, although he knew that the inclination of the human heart still tended towards evil from his youth. God established an immutable cycle for creation. As long as the earth lasts, sowing and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night will not cease. And so the new world began. God blessed Noah and his sons, saying, "Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth." Humanity was starting over, but with a new purpose. However, although everything seemed different, something would soon prove that human nature had not completely changed. God, in his infinite mercy, gave a commandment to the new humanity, to multiply and fill the earth again. But along with this order also came a fundamental principle, the sanctity of human life. He declared, "He who sheds man's blood, by man his blood will be shed, for in the image of God man was created." This was a powerful reminder that life was not to be treated lightly, as every human being bore the mark of the Creator. It was then that God did something he had never done before. He established a covenant, not only with Noah and his descendants, but with all of creation. an eternal commitment, a promise that never again would a flood destroy the earth and all flesh. This covenant was not only a treaty between God and men, but also a visible reminder in heaven for all future generations. And what was the sign of this pact? The rainbow God said to Noah and his sons, "Behold, I set my bow in the clouds, and it will be a sign of the covenant between me and the earth. When I set clouds over the earth, and the bow appears in them, I will remember the everlasting covenant between me and every living creature." This promise meant that, despite human failings, the destruction caused by water would never occur again. With every rain that falls, with every arch that appears in the sky, this alliance is reaffirmed. The rainbow is not just a natural phenomenon, it is a reminder of divine faithfulness, of the grace that still sustains humanity despite its inclination to error. But even in the face of this new opportunity, Noah and his descendants bore something inevitable: the mark of sin. The hope of a purified world was soon confronted by human failings. The story of the flood had come to an end, but humanity's journey had barely begun. As the years passed, Noah's children dispersed and formed new civilizations. Towns arose, cultures developed, and God's promise continued to be fulfilled. But the heart of man, this continued to be a battleground between obedience and rebellion, and thus the new history of humanity developed. From the Mesopotamian plains to the first great empires, the destiny of the world was being shaped. But in the midst of the growth of nations, something would happen that would once again change the course of history. An event that would reveal that even after the flood, man still carried within him the ambition to become equal to God. But that is another story. The flood ended, humanity began anew, and God sealed an eternal covenant with Noah and all creation. But has man learned from his mistakes? Could it be that, after witnessing the total destruction of the world, he would finally walk in the ways of God? The answer, as you can imagine, lies in human nature. The human heart has always been a battlefield between obedience and rebellion. The story of the flood was just one chapter. What came next? The Tower of Babel, empires that rose and fell, civilizations that defied God. And believe me, what happened shaped the world as we know it today. Now I want to hear from you. If you understand that the history of humanity is cyclical and that the lessons of the past are key to understanding the present, write in the comments, "I choose to learn." Show that you are not like the majority who ignores the signs and repeats the same mistakes. We on the channel messages do Reino will leave A, as in your comment, as a form of recognition of your commitment to knowledge. And if you really want to continue this journey of discovery, don't stop here. Now on screen are two essential videos that will open your mind even further to the hidden mysteries of humanity. Click now and continue discovering the secrets of the past. It is clear, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell so you don't miss any revelations that could change your view of the world.